Okay. Hi, Ron.
So how's this work? This is.
Is this the
You run the
second
meeting.
one? Or is this still the
This
first?
is the first one still.
Okay.
Second one goes in the fall.
Cool.
Because this one's got to be good
To make the, yeah.
to help this one.
Oh, sure.
But I'm right-handed, so that would be harder.
Let me just put my stuff down.
Don't ask me to sign in.
You better work on left hand.
We can add some more. Okay.
I help. I do maintenance in the capital projects.
Pretty. It's makeup. I don't usually see you with makeup on.
Once in a while, I dig it out.
Oh, and I love the tattoo.
Thank you. It's turned out really good.
It sure did.
It's a whole story.
It's the whole story of like our life, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the color.
I can't wait to see that. Who else do we need? Oh, we're missing.
Let's do it.
So I try to do it in a polite way, like, okay, this is, what do we got?
Introductions, yes.
How do we like,
Okay. I think we have enough seats. Bruce is
Yeah,
there?
we may, yeah.
Yeah.
And
Murphy can sit right
Ray
there.
and Roxanne, yeah.
and you
Yeah,
know,
Roxanne's got her stuff down.
Hey, Tom,
probably can do that.
we want the medals. I just talked to
And
them.
cell
If you can get us some for the.
Yep. We have it. Cell cabs at 2:30.
You have to, we're gonna have to up our
Cell cabs at
spending.
2:30. So you got an hour and a half is what I'm telling you.
I thought that
If
was
we
you.
need more, we can
He's Fort Myers Beach mosquito.
make them wait.
We need, that's why I put kind of a script together.
Perfect, perfect.
There's a lot in here.
Sure is.
We want influence.
It doesn't match our energy, at least, that's for sure. Hello, how are you?
Everyone ready?
I always tell them, don't worry about calling me.
I
If I'm available, I'll call you right back. If not, I'll call you as soon as I can.
Okay. Amy, I can't tell if this is, is it going through the microphones fine? Okay, super. So we'll call this meeting to order. This is a joint session, work session with the Public Safety Committee. Mr. Goggin will actually run the meeting, but we are calling this to order at 1 p.m. on May 9th, 2019. If I could just remind everyone, you've got to talk into the microphone, so everybody's sharing them. Otherwise, you won't be picked up for the recording. And if we could just start with everyone introducing themselves for the transcriber.
John Goggin.
Ray Murphy.
Heidi Youngworth.
Joanne Champ.
Roxanne Hossafrost.
Chelsea O'Reilly.
Ed Scott.
Joe LaDuca.
Bruce Butcher. Tom Gressman.
Ron Fleming.
Anita Saracita. Okay.
Okay,
And,
so
and we also have a follow-up joint session with CellCab at 2:30, so that's kind of our timeline unless we need to reschedule for more. Go ahead.
okay, so we're tight on time, so let's just get at it because there's a lot in here. As you can see from the discussion, it's crosswalks, trolley stops, bicycle markings, the MPO study, Crescent sidewalk, et cetera. But what I've done, you've actually got, and this is, I'll take the hit on this. My timing was off on getting the handouts to Chelsea and to Jason. So you have things in your booklet, and you also had a thing when you sat down in front of you at your seat there. And in there, if you take off the first 2 pages, which is the ordinances,
Yep.
put them towards the back. We're not going to use those right away. What I did to try and get through this is I put together a little script, and you'll see it. It says review and recommendations on the top of the page.
Okay.
Like 3 pages in. Everybody got it? That's what we're going to run through. So starting with crosswalks, and slow me down whenever you need. I've been in New York lately, so we're good to go. I got a double espresso here. So what we did is we took all the segments on the boulevard here, and what we started with, the north end, I'll give you a breakdown of what we've done on them. The north end, all we looked at is best practices. It's done. We didn't do any recommendations. For segment 1, there are several videos that Joe has taken. You can find them out on YouTube that documents just how poorly lit those crosswalks are and why there's a need for lighting, but it gives us some justification and discussions with the county. We did a lot of discussion on the random pedestrian crossings that take place and what legal requirements are there needed to enforce jaywalking, try and direct them. We talked to the county about pedestrian railings, and the big issue with that is not that they're opposed to them, but they are limited because of all the driveway accesses that are out there. On the other hand, if you look right in front of Lani Kai, Yotako, and that stretch there is a place where you could put some railings in, direct them to that Yotako crosswalk. So that's something we're going to look at as we go through this discussion with you and the county. However, what we didn't do up there is make any real recommendations on this span between the foot of the bridge down to about Chiastero, any crosswalk recommendations, the warning signs, et cetera, because that's all open for discussion right now with the county, with the state, and with the town. So what we would like to ensure is that our input will be as part of those studies are going on, and as our committee being a member of those studies, that we'll be able to put the recommendations that we have for crosswalks, for lighting, for signage, and that into those recommendations on that area. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Segment 2, the area, it's already complete, and the construction's nearly completed all the way down to past Publix there. And so the county has, I'll say reluctant, it was a little stronger than that, to perform any sidewalk reconstruction modifications. But we did look at this area, and we looked at it. We do have some recommendations about crosswalks, but it's primarily around the lighting and the signage that will go into those crosswalks there, as opposed to any reconstruction of any of the sidewalk areas that show up in there. We've also reviewed the trolley stops in that segment. Segment 3 and 4, this is from Publix down to where segment 5 begins. I think it's just down past Lenell, or down in that general area. By the way, if anybody actually wants to see this detail, Heidi has actually taped this whole boulevard together and marked all these recommended changes on it, so when we have a discussion. So she can roll that out, but really to look at it, we don't have the time. But it'll give you an idea of the level of work that the committee went through to get there.
It was easier for me.
It doesn't work for people with older eyes trying to read that. But on segment 3 and 4, the county has completed the design. They haven't really built all the construction in there. So if there's crosswalk modifications we really feel strongly about and that the council feels strongly about, we would still pursue that with them. And there is some potential for them to modify some of the sidewalk cutouts to put this in. And again, we looked at the trolley and the crosswalk location. Segment 5, the county is in design phase. They are taking all our recommendations on this. They'll take the input and go from there. But that gives you an idea of what we've done on the boulevard from the north end all the way through. In your packet, there is also a detailed listing of all the recommendations we had so far. And they are quite extensive, and I believe that's in your regular packet. This is why it's a little confusing. I take the blame for it.
No, don't worry.
But in there, you will see the level of detail the committee went into in looking at every crosswalk, whether in the mid-block, whether they're on the intersections, et cetera, and the rationale for trying to move some of those. And if you open in your packet for this meeting, right at the beginning, Ray,
On page 4?
right here. So it's the very first page you have in there. It says Public Safety Committee on trolley stops and crosswalks. We don't want to take the time to go through that, but that does go down through every segment and shows areas where we thought there needed to be changes. So that's kind of the background on the scope of what we looked at. Now let's talk some specifics about the components of it. So crosswalks, recommended locations, all beach accesses, both public and private. And with this, we're looking at a direct from one side of the street to the beach side at a crosswalk, at a beach access, or in areas where there's beach accesses close together. So if you look at Connecticut, it's pretty much directly across from the intersection. If you look at Hercules and Coconut, doesn't make sense to put crosswalks at both of those blocks because you get what you call crosswalk fatigue. So they're so close together, if we put one in the middle that allows easy access to both of those both those beach accesses, to us that made a little more sense. And by the way, committee members jump in whenever I'm saying something that you didn't agree with. So we're looking at every beach access, and this includes the private beach accesses, just because of the volume of traffic that would put across through there. We also looked at crosswalks at every trolley stop location. Some of these would be at intersections. Again, some of these are mid-block. So if the trolley stop access, so again, let's use Hercules and Coconut, if the trolley stop fits mid-block, then it makes sense to do that because it's a short half-block walk to get to the beach accesses without the fatigue of too many crosswalks going along. We looked at high-volume side streets. An example is Bay Beach. People coming out of Bay Beach that want to cross there to get to wherever they want to get to on crossing there. So high-volume intersections, we're also recommending crosswalks at those. Public facilities, such as churches. For some reason, go ahead.
At Bay Beach, are you talking about where the road comes out or where the beach access?
Bruce?
Where the road comes out or where the beach access?
Road comes out. This is separate than the beach access. This is another place where we believe there should be crosswalks, where there's high-volume side streets where multiple developments may be in a side street where people come out of that side street and may want to go directly across.
So would you recommend leaving the beach access one there as well?
That'll depend on the crosswalk fatigue and the distance between them.
It's close.
But
Very
Bay Beach is an example of where you have a high-traffic development that has a single outlet onto the boulevard. Those type of locations is where we'd be looking at there should be a crosswalk. As opposed to a crosswalk at, say, Hibiscus, which is a small residential neighborhood. There should not be a crosswalk there if there's one in close proximity, and that's where we get to spacing in a minute. Make sense, Ray?
Just that Bay Beach one. Most of those people that coming out of Bay Beach Lane there, they go right to that existing crosswalk now.
Yep.
And I think if you put another one out, you're not talking about putting another one out?
Not necessarily.
No, okay.
Maybe I shouldn't use Bay Beach as the example.
Okay.
The idea is that
Right.
high-volume neighborhoods where there's a single outlet to
Right.
the sterile, there should be a crosswalk in close proximity to that. Oh, yeah. In most cases, at the end.
We
where
had
you
a
have-
big discussion with the county as far as, we wanted to see if they'd be able to put any more crosswalks on the north end. That's where the big issue is. And they said, no, it's not gonna change. There's only 7 crosswalks between Crescent Street and the Shamrock. And some crosswalks are 230 yards apart. Okay, it's a high-volume area, and we had a suggestion, can't we put a crosswalk on every side street? People are not gonna walk, they're not doing it now, they're not walking down, they're not gonna walk 200 yards to go to the crosswalk, they're gonna jaywalk. And that's the biggest issue, there's not enough, and that's a high-traffic area. So that's part of it, but they're not gonna change it. Now we have to figure out what we're gonna do south, so the same mistake isn't made.
Okay.
I don't know if there's anything that town council could do to change what's happened on the north end of the island at this point.
If the council would like, we can look at that with this criteria in mind. But as I said, the segment 1, that's done, and they're not really receptive to opening it up, as Joe points out. But there are issues up there. But
There definitely are.
we kind of prioritized, let's take where we got a shot at getting some chance of making some changes and get some agreement with the council that this is in fact the locations types that they want, recommended location areas. And once we have that and we get the base of the island agreed to with the county, then kind of retrofitting that up here, we can look at the costs, et cetera, but it would be a different argument instead of trying to blur the two arguments at once. I don't want, what I hate to see is the county start throwing back the cost and changes to segment 1 and somehow impacting and diverting our conversation on segments 5, 6, 3, and 4.
But there may be an opportunity to look at segment 1 when that section from the base of the bridge to Crescent Street is accomplished. There may be an opportunity then, when the rest of the boulevard is complete, to come back into section 1 under that particular project.
Right.
And
Which
John,
is what we're recommending.
I support your thought process here, and the only comment I'd have with regard to the bus stops and things is I've had a couple people mention to me, now that the boulevard is done, and the county has taken the entire right-of-way, as far as their sidewalks and everything. So therefore, they're saying, how is there a bench now on my property if the county's already taken their right-of-way? So I just mentioned to you that I'm assuming that you're going to review bench shelters and bench locations, because basically they're going to be on private property, aren't they?
Some will,
It's going to impact that. So I just mentioned that in passing because it's been mentioned to me.
right,
Thank
and
you.
we're gonna get back to that specifically in a couple minutes. Okay, so moving along on the locations, public facilities, churches, St. Pete's, for some reason, the one by St. Pete's is gone. There's an example where you have a church, you're gonna have high volume, people move from the beach to the bayside, there should be a crosswalk at those type of facilities. Same with, well, Connecticut would have one, but Connecticut taking a public facility in the Bay Oaks or taking a public facility as Mount House, again, we believe we need to have crosswalks from the beach to the bayside there as well. The other areas, all intersections, as Joe pointed out, we looked at that. The problem with all intersections is you can get crosswalk fatigue as you move down the island, and then people just start to ignore it. It's just a whole bunch of lines on the road.
John, is there a standard for distance between crosswalks?
Oh, yeah, so next one down. You're on the wrong page,
Yeah,
Anita.
I'm listening to you. I'm listening.
So let's start with intersections. And so what we decided there is, for the intersections, again, it's the high volume, it's where there's spacing. That spacing is the other criteria for recommended locations. and
John,
that's the
can you
distance.
tell us what page you are there?
It's on the part that was
Yeah,
Very
on the
good.
desk.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
It's under this right here.
you guys got that, Roger? It was like the third page in.
Right here.
Yep.
Okay. So, spacing,
Got it.
which is the distance between the crosswalks, should not exceed 600 feet. And the minimum maximum, I believe I recorded this right from our conversation with Rob. By the way, he's been to 2 of our meetings to help us have this dialogue and put some rationality
Good.
into it. The minimum distance would be about 330, and the maximum is around 650. In high-density areas, 300 is way too much. As Joe's pointed out, there's areas up there where people are crossing because it is 300. So in those areas, we'd look for shorter ones, but in no case should it ever exceed 600. So even in the very low residential areas, they should be able to get to a crosswalk in less than 600 feet. So with this, and I'll go through them again, is there any other areas that the council can think of that we should look for crosswalks? And if not, are any of these areas, are there any other qualifiers you'd want to put on what we just talked about? Beach access, public and private, the trolley stops, the high-volume side streets, the public facilities, retail establishments. I'm sorry, I got distracted and missed that. We also talked about where they'd be crossing for, say, the movies or a 7-Eleven, that those areas should have a crosswalk. There will, and I'll give that person, if they choose to, the opportunity to speak up. There was also some concern that these retail establishments will be moving, so why build a crosswalk there? And I'll go my argument first, is because the building's there, and unless they tear the building down like they did at Tops, the chances are the crosswalk's not going to be misplaced. But others felt that wasn't necessarily the case if they'd like to enter that point. So,
I have a question.
Mhm.
Are you aware, I don't know if I'm being picked up or
Yes,
not.
you are.
Are you aware that there's a private beach access right across from the Dolphin Inn? It's almost impossible to see. It has a very tiny sign, but there's a lot of people who cross there, and there's no crosswalk for a long distance. Are you aware of that one?
yes.
You
'Cause
are.
Chelsea has given us a map of beach accesses, public and private. So that would be an example. That would be an example of where we think a beach access should be, crosswalk should be put in place.
And Chelsea, on that list is the condo building, remember, that just came in for the new, and they're going to put a flag
Yes.
at the south? Is that on there?
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks.
Did that answer, Roxanne?
Yes.
So how many crosswalks are there today? Did you get that info?
What did they say, 43? What's the number? Do you remember, Chelsea?
I don't know why I've got one here. Why am I using this?
I know how many we have. I don't know how many the county has at the north end. You guys.
Yeah, I don't remember the
Well,
number.
From-
There's 7 from Preston Street to,
from the foot of the bridge to the next bridge, how many are there?
The town has about 25 or 26.
You say the town.
The town maintains from Times Square south.
Crosswalks?
No, not crosswalks. I'm sorry, beach accesses. Sorry.
So So the question was, how many crosswalks are there?
Sorry.
From bridge to bridge? Do we know?
47, something like that?
Yeah,
47?
I think that was
So-
the range.
So that's probably 6 miles, right?
Yes.
And that's at 600 feet per, that would be 50. And if you went to 300 feet per, it would be 100. So the answer is somewhere between.
Bruce, nobody can hear you.
The answer is somewhere between 50 and 100 would be the likely amount. So it could be as many as plus 25 more. I'm just trying to get it under.
Yeah, and I don't think so, because we went through that, we did not add that many. A lot of them was placement because of spacing, more so than adding a great number of crosswalks. I don't remember the count, I could probably go through and give it to you, but we're talking 10, 15 tops. I think it was even less than that.
Oh, okay.
And there were some stretches where they weren't necessarily so required because maybe it's all residential on both sides of the street. So you don't have a lot of propensity for someone to cross
Right.
between,
I
say.
was just trying to get a feeling for how big the net was that you're trying to break here.
I'll get the number for you. I'll go through and count the thing up afterwards. Anything else on the locations?
No.
You agree with the locations?
Yes.
So with those locations,
Very well
we will
identified.
continue.
I'm not sure that we need a
to-
crosswalk at every church. I don't associate church going with going to the beach.
It's not
It's
that,
not-
it's
it's-
walking.
What we're trying to do is facilitate people to walk safely to get to a common destination, which would be a beach, a church. So if I live on the beach side and I want to walk to church, I want to crosswalk by my church. Whether it's directly in front of the church or in close proximity to the church, that's going to depend on the sidewalk fatigue or crosswalk fatigue. But the point is, if there's a church,
I got you.
okay,
I'm with you now.
okay. Okay. Yeah,
That didn't take long.
like I said, I've been geared up in New York for the last 2 weeks, so so then I'm gonna take as our next action on this is to continue refine our mapping based on this with the committee, and then get with Chelsea, and then Chelsea will hook us up with whoever we need to from the county and start to have discussions. Now, I will tell you that as we look at these crosswalks, there are things like crosswalk fatigue. There are engineering issues on bends. There's sightline issues that'll come into play. So where we say we want one at a beach access, for example, there may be sightline issues, fatigue issues, engineering issues on the actual road bed that may move those some. But our objective is, anytime we thought one belonged, because we told you we were going to put one at a location, if there's an engineering or a sightline reason for not doing that, we want to document that so that the Public Safety Committee minutes would actually have that. So 5 years from now, when you have a whole new committee, and they come back and say, let's put one here, you go, I don't know why that's there. Well, go look at the minutes.
A good example would be the Church of Ascension at the south end,
Exactly.
where they have where the crosswalks are located. They're a long ways from the church. But can we put one there because of the curve? So that's something that's an example of it.
Good example. Good example, Heidi.
And we'll talk in a little bit about some signage that might help us do something like that. So next up is recommended lighting. This one is actually kind of relatively simple. If you look at, and again, it's the packet that was at your chair, not at the other, not in your book. You have, it's page 17 on the bottom. It's not 17, or it's just the number 17 to identify it. Looks like this here. At the top, you see lighting over crosswalks, figure 12. That's what we're recommending. So that every crosswalk would have, they call it mid-block, but it doesn't matter. Every crosswalk would have lighting on both sides of the street. The idea being that you can see the person waiting to cross, you can see them while they're crossing, and you can see them waiting on the other side. So the lighting would span the whole thing. The limitation with this is, and actually Rob likes this, he was all for this one. The limitation is what's called driver blindness with too much light. So if there are street lamps and there are overhead crosswalk lamps that are too close together, or some kind of other natural lighting or artificial lighting in the area, a driver can actually be blinded to the individual standing under that crosswalk light. So as part of this, and coupled with the MPO lighting study, these two have to be aligned. We have to know where the street lights are going to be under the MPO study, and then look at the crosswalks in that proximity to determine whether it's dual or single cross light. Does that make sense?
Yep.
No, the crosswalks, to me, ought to be the priority. and then you take out the street light. Protect the pedestrians.
But you're also, oh, okay, and I'd make the argument, you're also protecting it if the driver can, you know, see where they're going. Okay.
That's why they got headlights.
May I ask about these lightings over crosswalks? Just, how tall are they? What are they like?
There's another picture, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody can dig that other picture out.
And I'm just worried, of course, about the whole turtle thing. So they're not the height of a typical street light then? They're a lower light? They sit lower than?
They sit lower than, I believe, a typical street light. Somewhere it actually has the dimension, 5 feet above the pavement.
5 feet above the pavement,
Yeah,
okay.
if you look at
I was
that.
down the south end of the island this week, just making some more videos for update and stuff, and go look at the Wyndham parking lot. They got lights all over the place.
Parking lot. Yes, they do. You're
Go look
right.
at them. They have more lights than anybody I've seen. It's like it probably lights up really good at nighttime. Maybe the turtles go there. Everybody's worried about the street lamps, but look at the property. Okay, where their lights are.
Yeah.
You know,
John,
they might be.
is that overhead lighting, is that in addition to or in lieu of the flashing?
In addition to.
In addition to? Oh, okay.
Yep,
good.
we're gonna get to the warning signs in a minute. This would actually be just to physically light the person in the crosswalk. And what I did, Bruce, I noted that when we're doing this, priority should be given to visibility of the pedestrian. Is that a good way to put it? Because
Yeah.
it may be, the overhead light may be the better lighting for them. I don't know, and that's why we have to look at
I
that.
concur too, yeah.
I do too.
That's real progress.
The higher the light, the more likely it is it's going to be a turtle violation, though, so
So,
the lower ones may be better options.
yeah, and one thing that Rob from the county is very aware of and brings up constantly is these need to be appropriate for the turtle season. So whether it's shielding, whether it's height, whether it's LED that can change the lighting, brightness, illumination, all
It would
that.
be,
all
it
that
would
is
be
part of
great if they were amber all year round, and then you wouldn't have to worry about it.
Or come the end of turtle season, they light up like Christmas trees for our tourist season, and then come turtle season again, they go back to whatever, right?
And
The
so-
problem is getting things changed.
But
People-
that would be ideal. I mean, I think about that every time, because I don't know how many times I myself have worried about hitting somebody on Estero Boulevard, because you just don't see them.
I agree,
It's-
we need more lighting.
We need more lighting, and maybe it would, when the island is busiest, is outside of turtle season. I mean, maybe it's something that we contract with FPL to do.
You know what, there is, on the commercial property near me, there's a light that they turn off during turtle season, a regular street light. I was shocked, but they have the ability to do some
Well,
add and subtract.
There's
There's
also,
also lighting that they can control how bright it is. So for the, I mean,
It's
these
the
would be
LED
the
lighting.
Or
crosswalk.
change the colors.
And in off-season, it can be bright.
Chelsea?
I can tell you in the discussions I've had with FPL regarding the lighting study that they are working on a new turtle-friendly light. The current one that they had implemented, and I don't recall what city it was too orange. And so they've told me by the end of this year that they should have implemented a new turtle-friendly light for their systems. So
But to Roxanne and Joanne, turtle lighting is absolutely, on top of everybody's list here as to we need to take that into consideration. And as Ray said, if we can, for example, use LED lighting where we control it, and it's used all over the states and the world, where you can actually control the brightness of that and the color of it, so that turtle season, when we have less pedestrians and less traffic, it's great to have a dimmer. But during season, when people are running all over, being able to turn the illumination up, that's exactly the argument we're trying to make with them.
Great, and John, you're very forward-thinking, so I'm sure you're on this.
I'm going to be politically incorrect and tell you that my priority is pedestrians. That is my priority, and I worry that in an overzealous attempt to shield the turtles, we have people who are moving about on this island that are in harm's way, essentially, because we cannot see them.
It is possible to do both.
I hope
It
so.
is
I
possible
really
to
hope
do
so,
both.
but I
It's
think
not an
it's not
either
what we
or.
have now.
It's
Okay,
not an either or.
good.
All right, so I'm making another note again, so I made it 3 times now. Pedestrian visibility is the #1 priority
it's
with the
hugely
lighting
important.
study and the crosswalk.
Yes.
And I believe everybody on the committee agrees. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody, okay.
Yep.
All right. So the lighting, as we said, we're looking at the 2 lights over the crosswalks. We have to look at it in conjunction with the MPO study, which is we haven't received yet, haven't started to integrate. But these 2 lighting patterns will be looked at together, so it won't happen tomorrow. This will take a little longer time to figure all that out. Any more questions on the lighting for the crosswalks? All right, now we get into, this is where we talk about the warning signs for crosswalks. And again, you're going to be going to your picture handout. I use pictures, so that's where we're going next. So there are actually 3 types that are used. One is called a pedestrian hybrid beacon, used to be called a hawk. And that's what you see on the number 44 at the top, pedestrian hybrid beacon. And most places on the island, this wouldn't be appropriate, because what it does, it's actually overhead lighting that tells people to stop while someone's in a crosswalk. So think of a thing
stop
coming
sign.
across and saying to stop. The only place that we thought of where this initially might be appropriate is down at Leno.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what everybody said until we talked to Rob. And Rob said it'd be great if we could do it, but what the consideration that has to go in, and so this is what we're asking for, but the consideration that has to go in here is the traffic pattern of the vehicles there with a hybrid light, with people turning left and right out of Leno, and people turning into Leno from the boulevard, turning right into Leno. So we are looking at this type of device there, but we are looking at it in conjunction with the vehicle traffic there so that we don't cause more problems than already exist. The other place where the PHB could possibly be considered would be Lani Kai area, but it can only be considered there if it was worked in conjunction and coordination with the lights that'll go up on Crescent and the light that might go at the foot of the bridge, whatever that design is. So that's the only place that has the volume where you'd actually want to stop volume of traffic for a certain period of time, like the studies that they did, Roger, on the people standing there.
Yep.
We'll look at it there, but right now, this hybrid beacon may not be appropriate because of the traffic patterns on the beach, although it looks really good.
Hey, John?
Yep.
If you go back to Leno and think about that, I can see what you're saying. This guy's turning left and the other street's turning left and right. But if you stop everything at once and let the pedestrians cross the square, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I
They
do.
can go diagonally, they can go this way. So there's one pedestrian crossing opening at a time. You open the gate for all directions. So you're stopping traffic in all directions. You're letting the pedestrians go in all directions. And then, so on.
Okay, so basically what you're saying, treat it like a stoplight would.
Yeah.
Only all stop.
All stop.
All direction, yeah.
The other thing, though, at Leno, we're looking at moving the crosswalk. So that'll help also.
To where? Heidi?
Now it's to the north,
Mhm.
and they're looking at moving, by the 7-Eleven, they're looking at moving it a little bit further south. So it'll come out by Dr. Bennett's building versus right by the 7-Eleven. And then the one at Leno, they're looking at moving it north, so it's closer to the CVS, not right at the corner. So it frees up the intersection so people can see when
That's a
driving
very good
better.
idea.
So if you do that, forget what I just said.
So just as a point, in your packet that was distributed
Today.
today, earlier, this morning, in there, that one pager showed you had all our changes on it. You also have all the maps. So you can actually go in and look at the change and look at the map that
good.
Heidi's taped together. You have it in smaller segments in this one.
And that thing, yes, and that thing.
All right. So the next type of warning sign is what's called rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And those you will find on page 40, number 40, at the top. And grant it's so hard to see, but if you look at the top, those pictures of the 3 across there, between the triangular sign, or the diamond sign, and the little arrow pointing, you can actually see the lights flashing there. That's why they sequenced the 3 of them.
Yep.
Those would be used at most crosswalks because of when you have it does point out here's a crosswalk, and the flasher is to catch someone's eye. I won't say they'd be at all of them because some of them just wouldn't warrant having that, and again, you get the traffic fatigue. And if I remember the webinar we went to, this actually they have to apply for it. This is some kind of still experimental thing or something with the state. I don't know why, but
$25,000 a pop, too.
Yep.
Very effective.
They
And
are
I tell you,
extremely
it's-
effective in the right place. Yeah.
I was down doing, I used the crosswalk with the flashers down there in the daytime. No one saw me. Commercial vehicle, just, I pressed the button, no
Where
one
were you,
stopped.
Joe?
I don't know, I was probably down by Liddell or down by Estero, right
Uh-huh.
across from Wyndham or somewhere over there
Staro
crossing.
Beach and Tennis has
And I
one.
noticed,
Bay Beach
just something to put in our, I'm thinking about it now, the flashing lights are way up here for the guys coming distance, but the guys that pull out the local drive, they're not looking up here, looking for us.
Sure.
Those flashing lights should be like lit up like a Christmas tree all the way down, where they're down low also. You're gonna have more visibility. I know at nighttime that probably lights up enough. What about in the daytime? I mean, I say people pull out, this guy pulled out of a driveway, and he didn't even notice the flashing light.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm glad we're
Good
doing
point.
the south end because it needs a lot of work down there.
Yeah.
I don't know how people cross at Bay Beach. It's dangerous. I mean, the lightings are not there and everything, so yeah.
So most of them we'd be looking at the RRFB. As Tom points out, they're not cheap, but neither is someone's life. So, we look at that. The other one that there is, and it's on the next page, it's called the embedded LED lights. And so it's not the rapid flashing going across, but in the sign, it has lighting that trims it, that flashes.
Oh.
Same principle, but a little different model. Maybe breaking them up will also help us break up some of the sign fatigue as well. But the other thing I want you to think about with this one, we talked about Extension Church down there, and it's on a bend. One of the things that we'd like them to investigate is with a crosswalk, and because there's limited sight lines there, using the RRFB at the crosswalk, but prior to the crosswalk, the LED ones, so that when I press the light to cross the crosswalk, farther up, maybe 25 yards or whatever the distance is, the LED ones would be flashing to give them, a heads up, maybe start to slow down before they get to the crosswalk. So we asked the county to look at that with us as well.
It's a good idea. Maybe that property with all the Christmas lights could tie in.
That's right.
Can
That is
we
distracting.
put speed bumps around the church? So it's-
With 3D crosswalks. So these are the primary warning signs. The dominant one that we expect to use here is the RRFB, assuming we get permission and the cost.
Do you know what the cost of the embedded LEDs is compared to the RRFB?
I can tell you that we installed one on Palermo, and it cost a couple grand.
One of these is on.
Solar powered, but unlike the RRFB where I think you push a button and it triggers the light, the embedded one it's constantly on.
Oh, so after you've seen it a few times, you
Right.
stop paying attention to it.
Fatigue, right.
Oh.
One neighbor told me it's like it keeps her awake at night, flashing in the window.
Well, that'd be pretty bright anyways.
Just to note, back when Bruce and I were on the Public Safety Committee, we were cautioned repeatedly by Rob about the RRFBs as being especially problematic as to driver fatigue. If you have too many of those on the island, people stop seeing them.
Right.
And we actually pushed to put one at Publix because it was so busy, and they wouldn't go along with it, even one more at that point in time, because of that problem. So I wouldn't get your hopes up too high that they will put very many more of these up, at least unless they've had a change of heart.
And I guess where we are, Roxanne, is we're coming in saying, and this was some advice we got from the town, tell them what you want, let them back off from there. And one of the ways we could see them backing off is the fatigue, sign fatigue. The study you guys did on the first, well, on the other public safety on the signs, what did you take, 170 some signs down or something like that? We read that kind of as a background for the same, with, if you have the exact same, same warning, people stop looking, fatigue sets in. The other is, that fatigue is part of it, and then cost will be part of it. And then there's also some volumes that are issues here. But the volume problem is, during season, we hit that number with no trouble. Out of season, we don't. So they go through that. Roger?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention with the rectangular rapid flashing beacon signs, if those are actuated, not on all the time, if they're actuated by pressing a button or something, that helps the fatigue issue.
Does that, so is that, those are the signs. Then the other thing that comes into play, and there's actually two other types of signs that are more along the refuge, you know, the pedestrian refuge. And one is, you know, the pedestrian refuge down in front of Holiday Inn Wyndham. I'm not sure what it is right now, but where the Sand Sculpture Festival is. That refuge, the purpose behind the refuge is, one, to give people time to cross. But the other thing that was brought out in the webinar we went to was, by putting a refuge in, people look both ways, whereas they just don't start out and get in the second lane and someone's flying at them. That would be the advantage of a refuge. On the other hand, they are disruptive to the flow of bicycle traffic currently that goes through there.
Well, that's currently.
Yep.
Put the bike lane there.
Yeah. So refuge is one, you know, I'd like to know what your thoughts are. I mean, Bruce, Roxanne, you've been down this road before, but refuge was one that really only shows up so far down
Yeah, but
there.
I think it's a traffic calming device too. And if you've got somebody, and there's plenty of somebodies that don't stop, regardless of what you're doing with the flashing light, and it gives you a place to sort of stand in somewhat comfort, in that you've got some things around you that you're gonna hope that the car doesn't, even though he didn't stop, that he doesn't weave through the center and hit you. And it's, so it's, you know, ideally those would be cement bollards or something, but because of the fire department and all this other stuff, they want them collapsible.
Where would you see us,
Better.
where would you see those on the island being appropriate to put on the island, where you have that kind of volume or need for the traffic calming?
Well, Estero Beach and Tennis Club and Bay Beach, because you've got thousands of people in those condos there, and they're going back and forth across the road all the time.
So Bay Beach, Santini, any other places?
That whole stretch there was always envisioned to be a traffic calmed area, Santini, right? From Bay Beach all the way up to past, say, the Holiday Inn, that whole stretch.
There was actually a plan of the boulevard that had on-street parking there.
I would suggest also the Publix Newton Park area, because you have a high volume of people crossing from the trolley stop to go to the store, A, and people from Newton Park going to the store to get food to take back to the park. So there's a lot of pedestrian traffic there and carrying things, et cetera.
I agree with you, Roxanne. I think of any other place, that would be my number one pick.
Particularly since they're not going to widen the entrance to Publix, and that's gonna become a Dodgem car intersection again. I'm still irritated about that.
Well, you might have an option to do something about that later.
Okay, so
Okay.
refuge, we're looking at from a couple. One is traffic calming device, and the other is the actual personal refuge for people crossing, giving them a place to jump out of traffic. And
The other thing the state advised us of in that webinar was that the refuge actually shortens the distance you travel, and that's their big deal. In other words, not having to play, remember the Frogger game, where you had to go
Yeah.
across 8 lanes of traffic. Now you just have to go
Right.
a short stretch, relax, take a breath, and another short stretch, and that's what they like about it.
I will say that the one at Wyndham saved my life the other night when I was coming back after dark, crossing in front of Wyndham, then to walk down the beach home. And I looked both ways, got across, got halfway, and a motorcycle came out of nowhere and just, and it had the lights on and everything.
There actually are two type of refuges refuge areas as well. One is as you see down in front of Wyndham, down there, and the other is one that starts across, and then in the middle, it actually has you walk one direction and then cross again. So think of it, as a step. And the idea is that does make them look twice. So those would be the two that would be looked at in the areas I've got are Bay Beach, Santini, and Newton Park, Publix area.
Just as a point of interest, the one at Wyndham, the reason it was put exactly there was because there was a street light in the Wyndham parking lot that allowed some light for that crosswalk. That area was not really a good choice because the refuge interferes with the people going south, turning left into that condo complex there. Can't remember.
Stereo Cove, right.
And I had several people complain to me about that when we put that in there because it made it awkward for them to get into the center turn lane. And that's, to me, a huge problem is when people don't get in the center turn lane and leave their tail end out. And those bollards down there at Satini Plaza are problematic because too many people don't understand how to pull into the center lane with them there, and they lay out, and it's just...
That crosswalk should have been down by 7-Eleven, get away from Windmill Road. And there's a lot of misplaced things down there. It's just, Wyndham's nice because a lot of people go over that way, but it's like, you're right at the busy intersection. And when like they said, when you gotta cut over in front of them, you don't know to cut behind. So, I'm sorry.
Malfunction junction.
Anyway, you have the stand-up things, and you gotta pull in front of them to make a turn, so it's, there's a lot of things that we're looking at, and I know you'll help us correct them.
I'll just add one more comment there. One of the reasons that you have to head to crosswalk there is because there's no sidewalk on the beach side of the road.
Right.
And people had to walk down the bay side to get there, and then they had to get across.
Right.
And with the sidewalks on both sides of the road, it changes the
Dynamic.
environment dramatically.
And that has also got to be looked at, because right now we're looking at the volumes there. Those volumes will change. We talked about that last meeting. The volumes will change as people can walk down the beach side as opposed to focusing the concentration because there's no sidewalk. That is part of the discussions with Rob. All right. So that's locations. I mean, that's the warning devices. The gold standard is the RFB because it's the most visible and effective outside of the Hawk, the overhead. The refuge will add to these areas, and then the decisions will really come back. When we say we're not putting an RRFB at this one, this is the reason it was not put there. So you have that for the record.
Good.
Okay.
All right, next up is...
You've done a good job. I mean, all you all have done a good job.
Thank you. So
You're welcome.
next up is directional and wayfinding signage. This may be tied into your next meeting.
Okay.
Because at crosswalks, wayfinding and informational signage is very important. But we're not going to do that, design that. We need to see what that other committee that's doing that with the application and the whole navigation of the island is doing. So I just bring that up when you're meeting with that committee about, we call it wayfinding, but signage they're going to put to direct people to Publix or to a church or to beach access. As they're building those apps, we need to look and make sure we're tying the crosswalks into things they're pointing people to.
Well, maybe you should have a joint meeting with Crab.
Maybe.
Or at least or at least you as chair meet with Becky, who's the person on CRAB who's doing the development
Yeah.
of the app.
Absolutely.
That would be good.
So I can meet with her without any violation
you
of
can.
any sanctity.
You're not on the same board. You can talk to her about whatever you want.
I'm not on any board. I'm not on any board.
Yes, you are on a board.
It's a committee.
Committee. Oh, committee, board.
Hey, John,
Whatever.
before you go to the next subject, getting back to the handrails, is there going to be a recommendation for handrails in segment 1?
So, as I said with segment 1, we know there's a possibility to put them in there, but until we know what that's going to look like, we're not making any
Well,
recommendations.
I don't mean from the bridge to Crescent. I mean from
No,
Crescent to...
I don't either. I mean, that whole segment down to about Kiostero, Hooters in that area where there's high volume, maybe Leaky Tiki now. Until we know how that traffic's gonna navigate through there and what kind of lights they're gonna put in and where, there may be other controls in place that would alleviate the need for a railing or even exacerbate the need for a railing. But,
Like what? I don't follow you.
so, Joe's got pictures, but,
Do something like that.
Oh.
Don't make it industrial looking. Make it look like
Yeah,
friendly. No, don't make it industrial looking. We got to make it friendly looking. I mean,
Yeah,
it's like
okay,
this is down in Naples or down at I'm sorry, not Naples, but that's down at Cape Coral, down at
I
Cape
didn't
Harbor.
see that.
People
They'll step
there
over it.
don't climb over.
I know, but you maybe go a little higher, but make it a little more.
You need barbed wire.
Yeah.
so, Bruce, would you like us to
Joe, could I see
map
that?
out some railing
I
ide-
think you should. I think we gotta start presenting that to the county because it's gonna take a while for them to digest it.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wanted to make the
exactly.
comment that
Yeah,
when you
I
put them up like at, by the Lani Kai, and I know they have all these driveways there, but if you put it up near the driveway, and then you put a little sign there that points to the crosswalk. When you come out of the driveway and on the right side,
Right.
there's a railing, and then on that railing, there's a little sign that says crosswalk to the right. And then if you come out the driveway on the other side, and there's another railing, and maybe there's a crosswalk to the left or not, or maybe it's back to the right.
Or maybe you
But-
just paint it right on the curb and point them to the crosswalk, but,
Yeah.
okay,
You-
we'll look
you-
at it.
You do something to get their attention that, hey, just don't walk
Navigational
across the
aid.
street. Use the crosswalk.
All right.
Could
we'll
I
add it
just
to the agenda.
say
Yep.
something? Hey, Roger, you know the Lanikai has their parking attendant box right at the sidewalk, and they literally block the sidewalk and the road. They stop traffic because they get them right there instead of bringing them onto the property to then do something. Do you follow what I'm saying? So,
Good
Thank you.
idea. Good point.
So that's the crosswalks. That's pretty much what we have so far in the crosswalks. Any other comments you'd like to add?
No.
Locations, design, et cetera? Okay. So next up is trolley stops.
oh, wait, did you all talk at all about our ideas about having crosswalks look different than crosswalks normally do?
No.
You didn't
Yep.
entertain that at all? You did it?
We tried to talk about it.
What
But-
happened?
Well, they have a set plan,
Oh, the county has their plans.
something about, remember when I
standard.
mentioned putting the crosswalk in the middle of the intersection
Oh,
to him?
yeah, I
you
did.
know,
That was
and-
up
and
in Lonnie County.
They've got like a set, I don't know, 4 or 6 feet wide and
Certain
four
colors,
four square at the intersection, and I
So the
mean,
only place we'd be able to do that would be on Old St. Carlos?
No, in fairness, we didn't take it directly to them, and if you want, we can meet with you and come up with some ideas for design. What they did tell us, though, and it'll come up under the bike lane, is that the conditions, the environmental conditions here with the sand and that really tears up the markings, and they're looking at how frequently they have to be replaced and the cost of doing that.
Well, I'm
So
gonna
that may
find,
be applicable
I'm
there
gonna
as well.
find the article that I just read again, and this was about the 3D.
I've got that.
Me too.
I mean, that just is such a no-brainer to me.
The
In certain areas, yes.
Yeah.
council previously had approved us to paint the intersection of
Right.
3rd Street and Old San Carlos.
Right.
And so we were looking to do that once season ended. So it should be relatively soon. And then once we kind of get some feedback from that and it being implemented, we can look on other town-owned and maintained side streets. I'd be more than happy to.
And we can add it to our agenda to kind of work with Chelsea to come up with some of the pluses and minuses of doing that. I did see the 3D design, and it does look like it would be a nice to help traffic. I think after a while, people blow through with their locals. Okay, so I add that to the to-do agenda, Roger?
Yeah, I was gonna mention, sorry, I just stepped out, but, with the design crosswalk point that mayor was making, I just want to remind everybody, if you put too much stuff on the request to the county, you may, so let's get them to commit to the crosswalks at the locations, and then maybe in the second wave, talk about what we'd like them to look at. I'm just afraid to put too many layers on the cake there.
Got it.
Well, and the good news is just, I want to make clear my understanding of our role in this. Our role is to make recommendations to you. You tell us, yes, we like the recommendations, and then to work with Chelsea and Roger and they strategize how to do the county conversations.
Yeah, that's good.
That,
Well, we can do that. I just want to. I think one of the things that really should happen here is that once you've brought everything to conclusion, then the council's in agreement that the mayor on behalf of the council send a letter to the county requesting crosswalks of type A, type B, type C, or with certain amenities at certain locations, or as per the attachment, as the official position of the town. And then that'll open the dialogue.
Great.
yeah, I just want to make sure everybody understands, we're not having the conversation with the county, the town is, and we're just sitting there as people. All right, so I added that to do is, one, put on our list to start looking at designs, alternate designs, working with Chelsea to look at the cost, the plus and minuses of that, and then time with Roger as to when that gets asked for in conjunction with other things. Next up is the trolley stop. Again, the location's very similar criteria as you have for the crosswalks. The issue here becomes, as I think it was Joanne or brought up earlier, maybe it was Rexanne, that some of the things are currently on individuals' property versus on public right-of-way. We have gone through and identified where we'd like to see trolley stops, and we got to have the same type of conversation with the county. This is where we want them. Why couldn't they be here? They have to defend why they can't put it there because of right-of-way, or we need to get an easement, or whatever those conditions are. But the same process we're following with the crosswalks, we'll follow with the trolley stop locations. And again, they're also in that full list that you received in your packet. The one thing I'd like to bring up, and I know we'll get time, it's a concept of, and I actually listened to the council meetings and the MPs and that, and safety's been coming up quite a bit.
It has.
And I'd like you to consider the concept of making trolley stops safe havens. And by that I mean sufficient lighting, contact to the sheriff from there, so that, let's say I'm walking down the street, I feel nervous, threatened, there's a lighted facility that's real close to where I am that I can go to, and I know that I can immediately contact the sheriff. They would know my location, and they can come and give me relief, protect me, whatever they want to do. But making these kind of a dual, and it could also be for medical emergencies. We want people to walk. We have an aging community here. If they can get to a trolley stop, contact emergency services, they're going to feel safer walking. So I really would like to know your input or your feelings on the trolley stops having a dual purpose. One, yes, shade people, they know where to go to get the public transportation. But the other is, we actually market these as a town as safe havens for the residents and the visitors, that they can have these available to them.
Do you mean
Thoughts?
like the things on Alligator Alley, where you can a call box?
Well, but maybe the call box is in there, but it could be a camera with a button they push that goes immediately to the sheriff's office. The idea is that we would put in here sufficient lighting and some communication medium to get to emergency services if someone feels threatened or in need. And what these would actually be marketed by the town is, the trolley stop is also a safe haven for you to get emergency services while you're out on your bike or while you're walking.
My first impression, and I hate to be a naysayer on this, I love the idea, but my first worry would be that we can all imagine how that could be abused. Push the button, and how does fire or police know that it's not an actual emergency, somebody just happened to have pushed the button?
So one way to do that is you have a two-way communication right there.
A camera or something, okay.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be a bad idea having cameras in there that are motion activated. So when the homeless guy lays down with his clothes at nighttime, it comes on and they can see what's going on. Or I get tired, or I drink too much and got to sit down. You know what I'm saying? It's
I think it's a good idea too in that case, Joe.
I like the idea of the refuge. You know, so it's-
My first reaction is that it's positive in limited locations. I don't know that we can count on it, but we certainly know areas that might be a very positive thing to do. But I suspect if it's not tied into a camera, then a lot of the fears or shortcomings that that Anita and I may be thinking similarly might be a problem, so.
What do they
And
do
then
on,
that's all cost, but.
what do they do on campuses where they have like the blue light box and what, you know what I mean?
I can tell you on my campus that they had the blue light, and it was a phone, and it went directly to the on-call person, the security, the campus security, not the sheriff.
Didn't have a camera though, just
No.
somebody grabs the phone?
Mine didn't, but I went to a private university, so.
There are a number of advantages to having cameras besides just security. As Joe points out, you can monitor these places for passive monitoring of them. It's also a way for any violence or any acts that take place there that you can document what took place. It helps with enforcement. As far as the numbers, first off, it's the concept, and if you agree with the concept, designing beyond the regular trolley stop to do that would be something we do in conjunction with law enforcement. But I just, I know that there's been a discussion on the island, and we talk about it for safety, but I look at aging communities and what aging communities are doing to encourage people to walk. We built the boulevard, we built the bike lanes, and we need to get people out there, but they're not going to get out there if they don't feel comfortable walking in the heat without a place to stop, without a place to rest, without a place to get water. And so therefore, without building this, we're not doing as much as we can to encourage people to use public transportation.
I like it.
Yep, so let's operate on the ideal and say, yes, this is ideally what we'd like, don't you think? And see, back off from ideal if we have to.
And that's the whole problem with Estero Boulevard. Nobody, when it started, said this is the optimum that it ought to be.
I know.
That's why we're where we are.
See, this is part of, fortunately in my past life, worked with the World Health Organization on aging community and building aging communities. And one of the reasons public safety is so important is we need to provide the areas to rest. We need to provide the level sidewalks and all these things that are going in order to encourage the aging community to be out there and walk or ride their bikes, because the benefits of that go well beyond anything that we've ever documented here. And that's why the safe haven and giving the ability to get water and shade in that is so critical in my way of thinking, that we build these sidewalks right.
Another way to think of the importance of them being safe havens is that I've also got feedback from people whose properties might be adjacent to shelters who are concerned about safety issues there, that they don't want to be the ones to have to police them. They don't want to be the ones that are subject to less than positive activity. So I think that it works passively for the properties that are nearby as well as actively for the users.
Okay. So we've got that, yep. And we'll design them as safe havens, and we'll get with the sheriff and we'll look up some more examples on that. But in the design itself, these are things that we're looking at. The whole idea is reduce the vehicle traffic, reasonable distance between, volume of travelers, relief from the weather, sun, rain. Now, the other thing that's the higher level question here is digital signage. And you guys were calling it advertising, I'm calling it digital signage. So if we look at the design, if you look at shelter concept number 1, for example.
Yep.
You see on the side there, it's got a little box where you could, or a little
It's my favorite
display area.
Yep.
Let's think this through. We put digital signage on there. One, digital signage versus, as Joe said, a real estate guy sitting in the back of a bench. But if you put digital signage in there, we do get some revenue from it. It helps offset it. But to me, more importantly, is you can use it for public service announcements as well. So in New York City, there was a health issue with the kids. The juvenile diabetes is going crazy, and they had the parks, but there wasn't a connection. So Bloomberg, what he had us do is we've designed it so that if you were traveling home on the bus to your neighborhood, you could actually put in there that tonight at this playground is this event targeted to this age group, which would get the kids in there and therefore reduce, they're getting more active, juvenile diabetes goes on. That was the rationale behind it. Here, it would allow us to give warnings for storms coming if someone's in the bus shelter. It would allow us to tonight at the Mound House, they're having this event or whatever it is.
Yep.
But you share the digital signage with things that the town wants to put out there, as well as opportunity for people to buy advertising that would be controlled through this digital media, and it would change so it wasn't the same person faded out in the back of a bench. To me, that's the advantage of building shelters that have digital signage, public service announcements, warnings, events going on, and then the opportunity for some revenue from those that want to buy digital signage on these things. And
This
I don't
could
think they're
possibly be
disruptive.
a good public-private partnership. This could be an independent firm. Now, do you know that at the Times Square trolley stop, that there is, it's just audio, but it's actively, telling you, it's sort of like Disney, Mickey 52 will be arriving in 3.2 minutes. It is very helpful. People love it.
I think it'll also be helpful for Bay Oaks.
Uh-huh.
Not a lot of people know where Bay Oaks is, and that could be
Sure.
something that could go on there.
Well, and
I love this idea.
all right, and it does go with the concept of the next trolley is coming at X, and it's full, so you're
Yep,
sitting here
exactly.
for 2 trolleys. So
Exactly.
this is what the opportunity it provides. What we put on there, Crab and a whole bunch of people will come up with, and someone else, and maybe public-private partnership. So with this, we'll look at that as part of the design, but with that, I believe you'd have to come up with a discussion in your council meetings about the ordinance that limits advertising
Yes.
at bus stops or trolley stops.
I see this on the Fort Myers Beach 20 years from now. When all these transitions have taken place, I see this kind of accommodation being commonplace. Because, the town's going to change. And it could be a beautiful structure. It could really help people, residents, visitors, everyone. Really love that idea.
Okay, so we'll look at it, digital signage as part of the design, you'll look at in relieving it, and then how do we get this discussion going about this public-private partnership you were talking about?
Well, I'm just thinking that, this is going to be costs, and I'm sure the county has X amount of dollars that they allocate, or FDOT, whatever, that they allocate to the trolley shelters. So if you want, the A+ as opposed to the C, where do you get it? And in the digital signage, I'm sure there's somebody that does that for a living. And
If you, I'm sorry, just as an aside, so we can focus some of the conversation around this, the pricing, Chelsea does have the current pricing for the various shelters. It's right after the bench picture. Right before the bike picture.
Yep.
So but I wanted so that people could see the pricing that we're talking about for shelter 1s, 2, and 3.
11,750. Does that include the digital signage? I would think not too.
That's what you see in this. Actually, your book shows exactly what's in Shelter 1. So in the book handout,
Yep.
Chelsea provided the details of Shelter 1, 2, and 3. But real quickly, you have Type 1 does allow for the digital signage, the shade. You get protection with the backs on there. Shelter Type 2 is just a roof over your head. Doesn't really protect you from much.
Doesn't
And you
help
hope
you
the
at all.
sun's at the right angle,
Exactly.
the correct angle. And 3, you could do digital signage
On the sides.
on the sides, but it's much more open, and the price differential between 3 and 1
Not worth it.
is less than $2,000. And so is it really worth building your future on less than, on a dime for $2,000? So with that, kind of,
And one comment I'd make with regard to Shelter 1 is that it'd be fun, when you look at the backdrop of it,
Uh-huh.
since you've got that great opportunity, let's use the town colors. Do it like it looks like
Exactly,
a sunset.
exactly.
Or, let's
Could-
make them
It could
ours
become
if we
part
can.
of,
It's $15,000.
Yeah, I know.
in your, or you get local artists to put murals on there, but in your booklet packet,
yeah.
you will see, this is a sketch in there. You actually see a picture of what one of these looks
Oh,
like
let
with
me
the
see.
transparency and the back and that. And I apologize for going once more, just so I don't,
That's okay.
there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
That's what it would
See,
look
I
like.
just love that.
All right.
And I could see it in different colors so that it fits the town, but I think it's, I'm going to say this out loud now because, of course, I've got nothing to lose at this point. I think that we should be thinking about, what if the county says, nope, this is what you've got? does then the town council step up and say, okay, we need 40 trolley stops on the boulevard, 20, however many trolley stops we need. We're willing to fund them, county. Couldn't we place them? And I think we need to be thinking about that. We shouldn't entertain this notion and then blame it on the county for not doing it. If we believe in this strongly enough, we should be
Well-
willing to participate. I
well,
feel the
in
same
that-
way about landscaping.
Right, exactly. And in reality, you know, maybe the number's not 40, but in that case, I think it would be helpful for the committee to come up with a priority plan. In other words,
Yep.
if we can only do 10,
Right.
where are the top 10?
Yep.
Or if we can only do 5, where's the top 5? Where's
Right.
the top 10? Where's the top 15?
Yep.
What's our priority list? That's always helpful to have that in the
With
back
the
of your mind.
boulevard right now, this is a beautiful capital improvement project.
So I've got 4 of the trolley stops. The location's very similar process to the crosswalks, but we've got, think of them as safe havens. Work with the sheriff to come up with how the best way to communicate with the sheriff would be. Looking at the cameras in there as part of that. Shelter type 1 is the one that you tell us you want us to focus on. Go ahead.
Okay, so the trolley stops that we can't have a shelter at, say, because not every trolley stop needs a shelter.
Correct.
Then what about landscaping to provide shade
Mm-hmm.
at
something
the
like that.
stop with a bench?
I guess you know something else I'd like to know, Heidi, is when the county budgets a shelter/stop, how much is that? How much do they budget? So we need to know what our base rate is.
And with regard to the landscape, I don't think you can have, like, totally blocking landscape,
Yeah, 'cause then you-
because some of the neighbors may feel that that's a security or safety problem, but perhaps shaded type. I
Right.
mean, in other words,
Yeah.
a shade tree,
Right.
Right.
where there's still great visibility, but yeah, you're getting
And I
shade.
think that's what,
Yeah,
that's what
'cause-
Heidi was talking
Yeah,
about.
because you don't want bushes, because then you're going to have people hiding in the bushes.
Right.
So, and what we're talking about, these areas where we can't put trolley stops, is because right now we're looking at only those that have physical limitations, not that we're talking about not doing it because of funding.
But when you say physical limitations, what do you mean?
I mean that there's not enough right-of-way, and the person that owns the property won't give an easement.
Okay, well, all right, but we should not preclude not asking.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely, and the county's on board with that.
Oh, well,
But-
that's good to hear.
Because you actually mentioned about the private property and ways to go about that. So that's what we'll look at, but where that becomes just no, and we can't move the trolley stop to the reasonable distance, then those would be the type that Heidi's talking about. Our effort is to get type 1 wherever there's space at these critical, at the trolley stops. That's number 1, and then we work our way down from there. Correct?
Yeah,
And
I would say so.
And we need to also focus type 1 at busy trolley stops. The Connecticut Street, because it goes to the Mound House. The Publix one, Santini, those areas. Because if we're going to have the digital signage, that's where most of our people are.
Yep.
So we want,
And that'll go
It
to
to
the
come
priority
together.
list that Joanne asked for.
Don't forget North Estero.
Yeah, that's
Who?
North
So,
Estero.
I shouldn't have done that, because I do.
You know, we have to, other thing we have to think about as far as the trolley stop, should be combined somehow with the school bus stop. I see so many children sitting on the curbs.
Oh my
on
gosh,
front of
can you believe
businesses.
that? I can.
There's no place for them to sit waiting for the bus.
But Joe, they also sit on the curb when there is a covered trolley stop, like
Yeah.
at Santini Plaza. I don't know what it is about curb sitting
Yeah.
that is so appealing right now.
Those bus stops don't stay the same every year. They change
It's
constantly.
true, they move them.
They-
That's true, they move them.
They create those bus stops on where the kids are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when my daughter was in school, we had a bus stop at the end of the island. There's no bus stop there now when she grew up. So it all depends where the kids are. So, you know, I don't know whether you can do that or not.
Yeah,
But,
I don't know.
but when you find out, you could certainly screw a bench in there and have them be able to sit down somewhere, you
Yep.
know, and get them off the street.
Be safe.
And speaking of benches, in your packet, there is a bench design, and that's the one that has this little thing in the middle so that people can't lay out on it. That's still the concept people want here, is that there's these low dividers to keep people from sleeping on there, comfortably sleeping on there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So that's, anything else on trolley stops?
No?
Yeah, I was gonna mention on the second one, that, the you know, where they have the display being sort of like L-shaped, you know, like kind of sticking out. That to me is a little bit of a, since it blocks line of sight, is a little bit of a security issue. Not to say that we shouldn't have a display, but maybe it should just be in the backboard of the shelter or something like that versus sticking out to the side where it blocks the view
So-
down the bench.
So in this example here, where the bench only goes part way, and then there's a spacing there, there's no bench in front, that's where you're advocating for the signage.
Versus
Right.
perpendicular.
Right.
Just so you have a viewpoint and you can't have stuff going on behind that sign that you can't see.
The problem with that is that then people stand there and you lose all your signage.
But if the signage
Yeah.
is attractive enough, they're gonna tell people to get out of the way.
They are, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
All right, so next up, and this goes to this picture, and it goes to the bicycle. This is the one with the little bicycle markings on it. So from basically where there's no,
Bless you.
here we go, I lost my notes here. Where, this is for the sidewalks first, where there is no bike lane. We've all either been walking or ridden our bikes or both, and had people very confused and say, on your left, and they jump right in front of you. One of the things we talked about is putting, so it's from Lover's Lane down, where there is no bike lane, down to the bridge, putting markings on the wide sidewalk there. One side would have the symbol of a bike, and the one is down this lower corner, and the other one had the people walking. And it's educational at best, that people say, okay, if bike's coming, this is kind of their lane, I couldn't be yelling at them. And also, so that people don't start yelling at you for being on the sidewalk, like some people did to one of our members the other night. But the idea is if we put markings on the sidewalk that kind of distinguish a bike side and a pedestrian side, that it would help people understand it's shared space, and also help them understand which side the bike should be on and which side the people. The one argument we did here, well, not an argument, one consideration that somebody expressed to us is, people down here can be quite territorial. And if you're riding your bike on this pedestrian marking, it could turn into some discussions. I'm not sure that's a reason for not putting the markings there and trying to educate people. What we're asking for is your input on putting sidewalk markings, similar to what you see in the lower right-hand corner here, with a bike on one side and a walker on the other, on these shared sidewalk area.
Absolutely, yes. And the other thing is, I love the implication that you understand that pedestrians may be going both ways, but bikes are really supposed to be going with traffic. Hopefully, over a period of time, people will learn that. It's a huge safety factor.
And with the sheriff's understanding, they see that going on, they can stop them.
Right.
They need to know.
And by the way, not to divert, but it's sort of on the same topic. If you're using that symbol, and we go back to your other page here where you talked about add to this ordinance, adopt a speed for sidewalk, limiting the speeds of bikes. Actually, the town council was talking about that, whether we could go to pedestrian speed. You mentioned in here how it seems to be 15 miles an hour. We've talked about trying to do it pedestrian speed. If we did that, then maybe you would actually also add something with this thing that talks about pedestrian speed or something.
Right.
Bikes and then at pedestrian speed or something.
Right.
So maybe that is all in there.
Yes. And
But,
well,
but
actually,
it's very difficult when you're on a bike to go as slow as a walker.
That may be true, but it gives you an idea of how darn fast you should be going compared to the pedestrian. Because you and I both know, we have people on electric bikes, they're not supposed to be on there, and they're zooming, okay? So it gives you an idea that you're supposed to be going the speed of the pedestrians. And I agree, sometimes like, if I'm just, you get an older person who's just toddling along, enjoying the view, you're not gonna go that person's speed, but then put 3 miles an hour or whatever. 3 miles an hour pedestrian speed.
Right.
But you
Yes,
get the idea.
I do. And
without
actually,
laboring the
it's in the
conversation.
notes to put add
Okay.
speed if you pass that, but that,
Okay,
we'll
well,
get to that in about
I
2 minutes.
support that personally.
Everybody, all the council then? Good. Then that's what we'll take to the county? We got enough to take to the county on that one? Sure. Yeah, okay. Now, bike lane markings. Members have seen where, so think of the bike lane that's gonna be putting in down from Lover's Lane down.
Yeah.
one of the members has seen and suggested that someplace had been, they actually have it full green, bright green, and the whole thing's lit up like that. So we mentioned that to the county, and that's when we heard about the maintenance of painting something like that or marking something like that and the wear that the sand in this particular island takes. So there could be a cost factor in there. So if it becomes, and we'll bring back the cost factor of maintaining that versus what's on page 7, the one that says bike lane, where it's just highlighted with the bike in the middle.
Yep.
It's not as dramatic, and it may not need to be as dramatic as the full green, but we really want to know, we like the full green. I mean, it kind of stands out. They had some reservations about it, so here's the question. Do we go to them with, we want the full green, prove to us that it's too costly and they won't do it, and then we default to the image here that says bike lane, or do we just go with bike lane?
Do you know what they're proposing now?
Bruce,
You know what they're proposing now?
I haven't seen it, have we? We haven't seen the markings for the bike lanes, have we?
I think you can see them. They have the drawing on Celamornar's
Yeah.
refreshed website. You can.
Right.
I think they're just planning on doing the standard markings.
it seems to me that the standard markings then become consistent with what you're going to put on the sidewalks. So there's some consistency there.
And if
But
we're
you could
gonna
paint
fight,
it green and still have the same marking. So the
You
real
could.
question is, do you want to paint them green or some bright color, solid, or are we,
Is it a lime
Okay with
green
everything.
or a Kelly green?
is it Murphy green or is it?
Is it green algae green?
If we're gonna fight for more money, it's not where I would fight for more
Me
money.
either.
And my other thing, and I know it's crazy, but visual things, with that green strip of our grass or whatever that they have right now, and then that green, I'm not sure if for some people, people drive up on the sidewalks and in and out all the time. So in some ways it might be confusing. I love the idea, but I'm not. I'm content if we can get this and spend the
I am
money
too.
elsewhere.
fine?
That ground cover might be pink, we
I
heard
am
this
too.
morning.
That's right. Mimosa.
Do you have something?
Our
No,
bike
we heard
lanes are-
something different this morning, Ron.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll hear about that later.
Our bike lanes are going to be very simple. The best example of the bright green I can give you is at Fifth Avenue South in Naples, across from 41.
Yep.
And they have sort of a goofy intersection where it's a series of one-way roads.
Yes.
And they have a brilliant green bike path because it's a real convoluted
Yes, that's right.
intersection.
Yeah, I know
And
what
it
you're
works
talking about.
perfectly.
41 and Fifth.
But we don't really have that scenario here.
Right.
We have very simple bike lanes. We just need signage to tell people what direction to go in the bike lane, and that would be,
Okay, so the
Sufficient.
consensus is we go with the design similar to right there on the bike lane on that page.
Yes, sir.
Sure.
All right, that goes to the last thing, or close to the last thing. The next up is the ordinance. So 1813 is the one that was opened up last year, but never, to my understanding, at least to our understanding, it wasn't voted on to actually add the language that was there. One of those is the front and rear lamps. This is section D. So section 2881, requirements D. The underlined part there, front and rear lamps shall be illuminated at all times when a bike is being ridden, used, or operated by any person. We did look at studies about lights during the day and effective or not effective, looked in Canada, across the U.S., and quite frankly, you could flip a coin with what we got for answers. There was nothing
Compelling?
compelling either way. And so you guys want it. We took a poll of the committee. The committee agrees that it does help illuminate the person, and so therefore you got a shot at safety. We don't see any reason that you shouldn't include it, other than the pushback you're going to get from some citizens who don't want to do it.
Having been in on that conversation when we discussed this, the pushback we got was like wearing out batteries, which, okay. But the positive thing, I think, was for the rental companies, or if you have short-term rentals who have bikes that they let their renters use, if the lights are on there and you're required to use them all the time, there's no mistake that as they get into the evening hours or if that early, that the equipment's on there. Otherwise, the bikes aren't equipped with them at all, and then they wind up, I wind up out after dark a lot later than I realize sometimes, and didn't plan on it. So that's why, as a council at the time when we were talking about that, we said, let's do it full-time, so that way everybody's got them on their bikes, by gosh.
And we've looked at studies. You can find them on both sides of the argument, so we're saying leave it in. Go ahead and keep it in there and go forward. The next piece up there is,
I would
Yep.
disagree. If we're wanting to encourage people to ride bikes on this island, if I go out and my batteries are dead on my bicycle and it's broad daylight, you have just told me I can't ride my bike to the library because my light isn't functioning at noon. It makes no sense to me. If we're trying, to me, it's more important to encourage people to ride bikes.
It is, however, but if you rent a bicycle from the bike shop and you say, I'll be back by 5 o'clock, well, you don't come back till 10. Now you have no light on your bicycle.
I didn't say that the bike shops shouldn't have lights on their bikes. Yes, they should.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I don't think we should be giving somebody a ticket for riding their bicycle down Estera Boulevard in broad daylight without a light on it.
and
You have to look at where
It's
this
the
leads
daylight
you.
stuff, yes, exactly.
You know, if you're really going to have a law that you're willing to enforce,
Well,
Yeah.
let's be real. They're not gonna be enforced, most likely.
well, then we shouldn't put it in.
That's right.
But you can enforce having lights on the bike at the rental shops.
Yes.
You can,
I didn't
So-
say I was against that.
So, my recommendation, and I am a firm believer that the lights are good in daytime. I wouldn't want to be on my bike anywhere around here without a light on. But, as a compromise, I would say we can suggest that you have your lights on 24 hours a day or all day, all night, but they must be on at dusk to sunrise.
I'm good with that.
Fine.
I'm good with that.
again, I'm good with whatever you put
Yep.
in there. We just didn't have a compelling stance to give you we didn't have a compelling stance to give you a study that showed either or. I understand what you're also saying, Rexanne, because I've gone out, and mine's died, it's
Yeah.
chargeable. But I was told that if that happens, you're gonna get a warning. Oh, okay, I get a warning. If mine constantly is out, well, then, yeah, you should go after me. But this one here, whatever you guys wanna put in there,
Well,
we didn't have
and then
objection.
as a devil's advocate again, though, this is a very confusing town. And to drive through with crosswalks, with the people walking, with the change where the bikes go up and off the sidewalk. I think anything that we can do to increase visibility for safety is a good thing. And that's why, it takes 3 or 5 of you, that's great, of us, that's great. I still would go for lights all the time because I think the visibility, you always err on the side of safety. And if it's a little inconvenient for you from time to time because your batteries are out, better keep some spare batteries with your bike along with your bike lock. But I always like to err on the side of safety, so I will continue to promote full-time lights on bikes.
And what would happen if you have that set up that way, there's no excuse for anybody not to have them on. Okay, so the sheriff can see there's no lights, they have to be on, there's no question. Don't they make friction-powered lights?
They do.
They used to. When I was a kid,
Yeah,
when
that's
the wheels spin, the light stayed on. You don't have to
right.
worry about batteries.
That's right.
So, I guess where I'd leave this.
Well, okay, I'm gonna go into attorney stance now.
Here we go.
Oh.
There is an accident. Someone hits somebody on a bicycle. If our law states that you have to have your light on all the time, and the person on the bicycle didn't have their light on, the driver's gonna use that as an excuse to say, I'm not liable, they were the one violating a law, and that holds some weight in court. The person violating a law is then seen to carry part of the responsibility.
So the fact that the guy drove through the bike lane and ran over the guy, he wasn't in violation of the law?
I'm just saying, when it comes to assessing percentages of liability, one thing that is brought up is who is violating laws. And to me,
So,
forcing someone to have a light on their bike in broad daylight when we don't have any proof that it helps.
So
Makes
let me
sense.
offer this as a compromise. We have, in a second, we're going to be talking about information to be included in the rental agreement, both short-term rentals and for the rental companies. If you go with, because we can't enforce it, we're probably not going to enforce it. I understand what you're saying, Roxanne. What if we put the recommendation in there that these, having a light on during the day is highly recommended?
That's what
But
Bruce
not,
suggested.
but I'm saying we put it into the we get the rental agreement to actually include that kind of, just as a suggestion. So
Sure.
in other words, whoever's renting the bike when they sign the rental agreement that has the ordinance that talks about you have to have it on at night, you gotta do this, this, and this, then in there it also says it's highly recommended.
Sure.
I'm thinking it's education.
Sure.
But are you also saying, though, that the rental companies have to have the equipment on every bike?
Yeah,
But it's optional if you use it during
well,
the
that's,
day or
we're gonna
not.
get to the
But
rental.
the equipment has to be on the bike. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
we're gonna get to the rental in a minute. This was just flat out lights on during the day. And what you guys are making a decision, but what I'm hearing is there's a real mixed bag about whether we do it or not. And the justification for not doing it is we can't enforce it. It could cause liability issues later on. And, so why do it? And the option I'd put on the table is we put that with the next part about rental companies and what they put in their rental agreements, and we put that as a recommendation, not as a part of the ordinance. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So, moving along, we'll just go real quick. The ADA compliance, we were pretty much said just leave that alone, so we did. But the concern here is at some point, people are gonna start using golf carts driving down these narrow sidewalks, and we have nothing in anywhere to stop them if they say, this is ADA compliance on this. I just raised that, I'm letting you know, we were told not to do anything, and we're not.
I saw a guy yesterday with a golf cart with 4 people in the golf cart riding down the sidewalk.
Yep.
Yeah, I see them all the
Oh,
time.
he had a license plate. He had a license plate on the sidewalk. I couldn't believe
And
it.
by the way, they transfer their license plates from other vehicles elsewhere, throw it on while they're here and throw it back off, so they're not really necessarily licensed. But it's a problem, and it's a problem.
Yep.
So the next part here, so ADA, we're just leaving. When we get to the next part, and it goes to, we know there was minimal compliance from some of the rental companies, and there was no law, so they didn't bother complying anyways. They couldn't have done much with it. But you're going to have an ordinance that has a number of things, and one of those would be lights after dark. They're required on there. There is a joint liability written in here where the rental companies, they're responsible for the people that are on their bikes. But what we're looking at here is that you, through the attorney, draft some language that picks out the key parts of your ordinance and requires the rental companies to put that language into their rental agreements. So in addition to adding language that said that they're responsible for putting lights and bells on because it could be used at night, that their rental agreement also has the statute about if we have a speed limit, about driving the right way on the road, it's whatever the ordinance says, so that when someone rides the bike, they're signing that they did read this section of your statute. It's educational, but it also may help with enforcement later on. Thoughts?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yes, including information about the fact it's illegal to wear headsets. I think a lot of people don't recognize that.
Since John took out of the room, my attorney. I don't know that we should get involved with a contract between two parties, the person who's renting the bike and the person who's leasing the bike. That's a contract between two private parties that we have nothing to do with.
That's true.
And I don't know that we want to be involved if there's an issue in the resulting lawsuit. Our way to really control things, people's behavior, is by ordinances. We say you're allowed to do certain things and you're not allowed to do certain things. If you want to, we can encourage people to do that, but I don't know that we can mandate people to do that, or we should.
Roger, rather than having it part of the contract, would you consider it a problem that we mandate that they give them a handout? They don't have to sign that they agree to it, but here's the rules of Fort Myers Beach riding a bike.
Okay, so
it's not a
if
contract,
the rule is you have to have your light on at night, if that's the rule, right? Is that the rule we're trying to get to, or we're encouraging them to keep it on during the day? What's the rule that we're trying to get to?
all the bike rules.
Right.
So
the
those
person running a bike knows what the laws are on the town of Fort Myers Beach.
so the
Lights on at night is a state law.
right. That's going to be my point. So what's the rule that we're trying? What's to ride in the direction of traffic? That's
that the
what
bike-
law. What is the law that we don't think they know that we want them to adhere to? That's what I'm missing in the conversation.
The bike rentals need to make sure there's lights on bikes. They don't do that today.
Our ordinance requires that right now.
And what the bike companies say is we have them for sale if the people want to buy them and put it on their bike, but they don't have them on all their bikes.
I'm not saying what's happening in practice versus what the law says, because
yeah.
there's always
Our
always a
current-
big difference
Right.
between those two
Why
things.
don't-
Right, because our current
What-
ordinance requires them to have the equipment, and it does require full-time operation. That's
Right.
what is
So,
currently in existence in
I
our
know
town.
we're cutting close on time, actually
Yeah.
over. Why don't we take this back to the committee, your recommendation, Rexanne, about a handout that we provide to them that they give that
Yep.
eliminates the contractual, but we also, as we look at it as a committee, we look at, where is there differences between our laws and our practices versus state law. So we'll look at that. The other thing that we want, go ahead.
I just had one other quick thing, because I know we're running out of time. I wondered whether the committee has interacted at all with Bike Walk Lee.
Who?
Bike Walk Lee, it's an advocacy group, a
Darla
countywide
Letourneau.
advocacy group.
I'll
Oh,
give
please,
you a-
please
I'll
invite
give you
them
a
to come to one
contact.
of your meetings. They will help you. They have studies, they advocate for complete streets
Dan
in the
Moses, who
county.
you want to talk to, and what's her?
Darla
Darla
Letourneau.
Oh,
Letourneau.
Darla,
You're gonna
but
send it to me?
Dan's
Send it to
the-
me.
I'll get it from
more
Anita
knowledgeable
now.
on
But
regulations.
They can, go ahead.
But who runs the LPA?
Meg?
Megan
Megan
Hile.
Heil is chair.
She's on Bike Walk League, or she was.
Oh, yeah, ask Megan. I don't have
All
it
right,
in
I'll
this
talk
one.
to Megan.
I mean, they will be valuable to you on multiple levels.
Okay, we have cell cab waiting, so let's,
Wrap it up, because I got
Yep.
just two things. One is the speed limit. Right now, ordinance 9505 says 15 miles an hour. We know that's not sufficient. We'd like you to look at pedestrian speed or 5 miles and revise either ordinance 9505 or go in and add it to this 1813 that you're working on. But we do believe that the current ordinance allows too fast a speed. So,
okay.
and the last thing, we'll get the updates from Chelsea on the MPO and that. But the last is I sent you a letter, or I sent it to the council through Chelsea. Tom is going to be our representative on the MPO Citizens
Oh,
Advisory Committee.
fantastic.
So-
Thank you very much for
So
doing that.
whatever you need to do to get him rolling on that, I appreciate that if you could get that started.
Roger, can you take care of that?
There's
Have
a
a
nomination
motion?
process from the council that we'll work on.
Okay. And there is a letter that was sent to you guys.
Yes.
Actually, it's in your packet as
Yep,
well.
yep.
All right, with that.
Thank you very much.
Real quick though, the lighting study, so here's the things that we need follow-up. The lighting study, but also where the RFPs for Crescent Street and that stuff is, and we need to get that from Chelsea, and maybe she can just send us an update.
Do you want to have a follow-up?
Crescent Street sidewalk was part of it, the lighting study was part
Oh,
of it.
okay.
And just thank you so much. Your committee's awesome.
Yep.
And we really
So just so you know, just real quick.
Everybody,
That the council's going to have to, we're going to have to do some project prioritization. And so we'll be discussing that with the council. And they'll slot when the Crescent Street sidewalk and the Number Streets sidewalks are installed based on that scheduling.
Yeah, it was the design of those,
The design is moving forward in terms
Right.
of getting that done, but I'm talking about the actual construction.
Chelsea's going to show us that. So just to wrap this up, I'll summarize this, I'll get it to the committee, get all their corrections to my mistakes, and then we'll come back and do a report to the council, and then we'll go next steps.
let us know when you need another joint meeting, and thank you all very much. The joint meeting of the Public Safety Task Force is adjourned at 2:36 PM.
appreciate it.
That was very good. You got through a lot in a very short time. Excellent. Excellent. Oh,